This is a recitation of Chapter 3 of Shinran's masterwork called the Kyo Gyo Shin Sho, or the true teaching, practice, and realization of the Pure Land Way. Chapter 3 is entitled The True Shinjin of the Pure Land Way, or, more comprehensively, it is called A Collection of Passages Revealing the True Shinjin of the Pure Land Way. In the preface, Shinran says, "As I reflect, I find that our attainment of Shinjin arises from the heart and mind with which Amida Tathagata selected the vow, and that the clarification of true mind has been taught for us through the skillful works of compassion of the great sage Sakyamuni. Here I, Gutoku Shinran, disciple of Sakyamuni, reverently embrace the true teaching of the Buddhas and Tathagatas, and look to the essential meaning of the treatises and commentaries of the Masters. Fully guided by the beneficent light of the three sutras, I seek in particular to clarify the luminous passage on the, quote, mind that is single. Reverently contemplating Amida's directing of virtue for our going forth, I find there is great Shinjin. Great Shinjin is the superlative means for attaining longevity and deathlessness. It is the wondrous way to awaken aspiration for the pure and rejection of the defiled. It is the straightforward mind directed to us through the selected vow. It is Shinjin that actualizes Amida's profound and vast benefiting of others. It is true mind that is diamond-like and indestructible. It is the mind that is single, realized by the person who is grasped and protected by the compassionate light. It is great Shinjin, rare and unsurpassed. It is the quick path, difficult for people to accept. It is the true cause of attaining great Nirvana. It is the white path by which all virtues are fulfilled instantly. It is the ocean of Shinjin that is itself suchness or true reality. This mind arises from the vow of birth through the Nembutsu. This vow is known as, quote, the selected primal vow, the vow of the threefold mind of the primal vow, the vow of sincere mind and entrusting, and further may be called the vow of Shinjin, which is Amida's directing of virtue for our going forth. Realizing true and real Shinjin takes place through the Tathagata's supportive power. It comes about wholly through the power of great compassion and all-embracing wisdom. If pure Shinjin should be realized, that mind will not be inverted. That mind will not be vain or false. Thereupon, that sentient beings will realize the mind of great joy and receive the veneration and love of all the sacred honored ones. The Sutra of the Tathagata of Immeasurable Life states, quote, if, when I have realized the supreme enlightenment, living beings in other Buddha lands should hear my name, I will, with sincere mind, direct all my roots of good to them. Aspiring to be born in my land, they shall say my name perhaps even 10 times. If they should not be born there, may I not attain enlightenment. The passage declaring the fulfillment of the primal vow in the larger sutra states, quote, all sentient beings, as they hear the name, realize even one thought moment of Shinjin and joy, which is directed to them from Amita's sincere mind, and aspiring to be born in that land, they then attain birth and dwell in the stage of non-retrogression. The Sutra of the Tathagata of Immeasurable Life states, quote, "When, upon hearing the name of the Tathagata of Immeasurable Life, sentient beings of the Buddha lands of other quarters awaken one thought moment of pure Shinjin, rejoice, and, cherishing Amita's directing of his roots of good to them, aspire to be born in the land of immeasurable life, then all shall be born in accord with their aspiration, attaining the stage of non-retrogression and ultimately the supreme perfect enlightenment." Further, the larger sutra states, quote, "The one who hears and never forgets this Dharma, but sees and reveres it and greatly rejoices in attaining it, that person is my true companion. Therefore, awaken this mind." Further, the Sutra of the Tathagata of Immeasurable Life states, quote, "Such a person shall enter the preeminent gateway of the boundless Buddha Dharma." Further, it states, "The virtues of the Tathagata are known solely to Buddhas. Only a world-honored one is able to reveal them. They lie beyond the grasp of devas, nagas, and yaksas, and the two vehicles by nature are incapable of expressing them. Even if all sentient beings were to become Buddhas, performing activities surpassing even Samantabhadras and reach the other shore, though they try to enumerate and expound the Buddha's virtues, it would not be accomplished even in incalculable kalpas. Even if, in the meanwhile, their bodies were to pass into extinction, still they would not have exhausted the Buddha's incomparable wisdom. For this reason, those who realize Shinjin hear and are embraced by true friends. Those who come to hear this profound and peerless Dharma shall be venerated and loved by all sacred, honored ones. Only Buddhas comprehend the significance and words of the teaching of the Tathagata's supreme wisdom, which pervades all space. Hence, listening well concerning the land of all-knowing wisdom, entrust yourself to the true words of my teaching. It is immensely difficult to receive human existence, and again, difficult to encounter a Tathagata's appearance in the world. The consummate wisdom of Shinjin is rarely realized. Hence, the practicer must be diligent. When you have actually heard this excellent Dharma, you constantly bring joy to all the Buddhas. The hymns to Amida Buddha by Master Tan Luan states, "All sentient beings hear Amida Buddha's name of virtues, realize Shinjin in joy, and delight in what they hear for even a single thought moment. When those of sincere mind, which has been directed to them, aspire to be born in the Pure Land, they are all enabled to go there. Therefore, I offer homage and aspire for birth." The commentary on the Contemplation Sutra by Master Shan Tao states, "All shall be saved in accord with the will of Amida. With his 5 kinds of sight, he perceives all beings perfectly, and with his transcendent powers, he works freely and without restriction. When he sees a being ready to be saved, in a single thought moment, neither before nor after, he appears before that being in both body and mind, and with the 3 wheels of thoughts, words, and deeds, he brings him or her to the realization of enlightenment." Further, it states, "Deep mind is the deeply entrusting mind. There are 2 aspects. One is to believe deeply and decidedly that you are a foolish being of karmic evil, caught in birth and death, ever sinking and ever wandering in transmigration from innumerable kalpas in the past, with never a condition that would lead to emancipation. The second is to believe deeply and decidedly that Amida Buddha's 48 vows grasp sentient beings, and that allowing yourself to be carried by the power of the vow without any doubt or apprehension, you will attain birth. Further, it is to believe deeply and decidedly that, as taught in the Amida Sutra, all the Buddhas throughout the 10 quarters, countless as the sands of the Ganges, give their witness and encourage all foolish beings to attain birth without fail. May all practicers, persons of deep and trusting mind, single-heartedly entrust themselves to the Buddha's words alone, and, thinking not of their lives, but relying utterly on the practice of the Nembutsu, abandon what the Buddha brings them to abandon, practice what the Buddha brings them to practice, leave what the Buddha brings them to leave. This is called, quote, being in accord with the Buddha's teaching, being in accord with the Buddha's intent. This is being in accord with Amida Buddha's vow. This is to be a true disciple of the Buddha. Further, all practicers who, in accord with the Contemplation Sutra, entrust themselves deeply to this practice alone will never fall into error in guiding other sentient beings. This is because the Buddha is the person in whom great compassion is consummate and perfect, and because his words in the sutra are true. When one is in accord with the Buddha's intent, he will give his sanction, saying, quote, so it is, so it is. The Buddha's bestowing of sanction means that one is in accord with the Buddha's right teaching. What is taught by the Buddha is the, quote, fully expressed teaching. For this reason, I now respectfully urge all those aspirants for birth who have ties with the teaching to entrust themselves deeply to the Buddha's words and devotedly practice what they teach. Sakyamuni guides and urges all foolish beings to the saying of the name alone and to single practice throughout their lives, so that when death comes, they will be born without fail in the Pure Land. All the Buddhas throughout the 10 quarters, with the same intent, praise this teaching, urge beings to follow it, and give witness to it. Why? Because their great compassion is the same in essence. What one Buddha teaches is what all Buddhas teach. What all Buddhas teach, one Buddha teaches. As is taught in the Amida Sutra, Sakyamuni praises all the various adornments of the land of bliss. Further, urging all foolish beings single-heartedly to practice the saying of the name of Amida alone, he leads them to attain birth without fail. The passage that follows states that in each of the 10 quarters there are Buddhas countless as the sands of the Ganges, who all in accord say in praise, quote, well does Sakyamuni, in a time when evil acts and lack of faith prevail, teach and praise the name of Amida, encouraging sentient beings by saying, quote, if one says the name, one unfailingly attains birth. This is the witness. Further, the Buddhas throughout the 10 quarters, fearing that sentient beings might not accept the teaching of the one Buddha, Sakyamuni, all together, with the same intent, preach these true and sincere words, quote, sentient beings, each of you should accept what Sakyamuni has taught, has praised, has given witness to. It is certain beyond any doubt that when foolish beings, regardless of whether their evil or merit is great or small, or the period of time long or short, just single-heartedly practice the saying of the name of Amida alone, they unfailingly attain birth. It is stated in Genshin's Essentials for Attaining Birth, quote, "Although I too am within Amida's grasp, blind passions obstruct my eyes, and I cannot see the light. Nevertheless, great compassion untiringly and constantly illumines me." Hence, whether with regard to practice or to Shinjin, there is nothing whatever that has not been fulfilled through Amida Tathagata's directing of virtue to beings out of his pure vow mind. It is not that there is no cause, or that there is some other cause. Reflect on this. The Buddha's intention is difficult to fathom. When the Tathagata, in profound compassion for the ocean of all sentient beings in pain and affliction, performed bodhisattva practices for inconceivable millions of measureless kalpas, there was not a moment, not an instant, when his practice was not pure, or lacked true mind. With this pure, true mind, the Tathagata brought to fulfillment the perfect, unhindered, inconceivable, indescribable, and inexplicable supreme virtues. The Tathagata gives this sincere mind to all living things, an ocean of beings possessed of blind passions, karmic evil, and false wisdom. This mind manifests the true mind of benefiting others. For this reason, it is completely untainted by the hindrance of doubt. This sincere mind takes as its essence the revered name of supreme virtues. Thus, the largest sutra states, quote, "No thought of greed, anger, or harmfulness arose in his mind. He cherished no impulse of greed, anger, or harmfulness. He did not cling to objects of perception, color, sound, smell, taste. Abounding in perseverance, he gave no thought to the suffering to be endured. He was content with few desires, without greed, anger, or folly. Always tranquil, in a state of samadhi, he possessed wisdom that knew no impediment. He was free of all thoughts of falsity or deception, gentle in countenance, and loving in speech. He perceived people's thoughts and was attentive to them. He was full of courage and vigor, and being resolute in his acts, knew no fatigue. Seeking solely that which was pure and undefiled, he brought benefit to all beings. He fulfilled all the various kinds of practices, and brought all sentient beings to the attainment of virtues." The Sutra of the Tathagata of Immeasurable Life states, quote, "The Buddha said to Ananda, 'Bhikshu Dharmakara, before Lokesvara Raja Tathagata and all the Devas, Mens, Maras, Brahmas, Shramanas, Brahmanas, and others, widely proclaimed his great universal vows. He has already brought them all to fulfillment. After proclaiming these vows, which are so rare in all the worlds, he actually resided firmly in them. Acquiring all the varieties of virtue, he adorned the pure Buddha land of vast, majestic virtues. He performed bodhisattva practices in this way, passing innumerable, countless, incalculable, unequal kotis of nayutas of millions of kalpas. During that time, he never harbored a single thought of greed, anger, or folly, nor any impulse of desire, harmfulness, or wrath. He cherished no thought of form, sound, smell, taste, or tangible thing. The constant warmth of affection and respect he felt for all sentient beings was like that for close relatives. His nature was harmonious and adaptable, without any violence or ill will. He always embraced a heart of compassion and patience for all sentient beings, and was never deceptive or flattering, never slothful. Encouraging them to do good acts, he led them to seek pure virtues. For the sake of beings everywhere, he was stalwart and fearless, and never retreated. He benefited all the worlds, and brought his great vow to perfect completion. Thus, through these true words of the great sage, we know indeed that this mind is the true and real mind of benefiting others through directing virtues, which originates from the inconceivable, indescribable, and inexplicable ocean of the vow of great wisdom, the one vehicle. Concerning entrusting, it is the ocean of Shinjin, perfect and unhindered, that is the Tathagata's consummately fulfilled great compassion. Hence, there is no mixture of doubt. It is therefore called, quote, entrusting. The essence of entrusting is the sincere mind of benefiting others and directing virtues. However, since the beginningless past, the multitudes of beings have been transmigrating in the ocean of ignorance, sinking aimlessly in the cycle of all forms of existence and bound to the cycle of all forms of pain. Accordingly, they lack the entrusting that is pure. In the manner of their existence, they have no entrusting that is true and real. Hence, it is difficult for them to encounter the unexcelled virtues, difficult to realize the supreme, pure Shinjin. The Tathagata, turning with compassion toward the ocean of living beings in pain and affliction, has given unhindered and vast pure Shinjin to the ocean of sentient beings. This is called the, quote, true and real Shinjin that is Amida's benefiting of others. The Nirvana Sutra states, great love and great compassion are called Buddha nature. Why? Because great love and great compassion always accompany the Bodhisattva, just as shadows accompany things. All sentient beings will without fail ultimately realize great love and great compassion. Therefore it is taught, quote, all sentient beings are possessed of Buddha nature. Great love and great compassion are Buddha nature. Buddha nature is Tathagata. The Garland Sutra states, Shinjin is the source of enlightenment, the mother of virtues. It nurtures all forms of goodness. It cuts away the net of doubts and breaks free from the currents of desire. It unfolds the supreme enlightenment of Nirvana. Shinjin harbors no defiled thoughts. It is pure, eradicating all arrogance. It is the root of reverence and the foremost treasure of the Dharma store. It is the hand of purity, holding all practices within itself. Shinjin gives freely and ungrudgingly. Shinjin rejoices and enters the Buddha Dharma. Shinjin makes wisdom and virtues increase. Shinjin unfailingly reaches the stage of Tathagata. Shinjin purifies the faculties, makes them clear and sharp. Its power is firm and steadfast. Nothing can destroy it. Shinjin sunders forever the root of blind passions. Shinjin leads one to seek the virtues of Buddha alone. Shinjin knows no attachment to objects. It separates one from the adversities, so that one attains the realm free of them. Shinjin transcends the domain of Maras, and manifests the path of unexcelled emancipation. Shinjin keeps the seeds of virtues from destruction. Shinjin nurtures the tree of enlightenment. Shinjin makes supreme wisdom grow. Shinjin makes all the Buddhas manifest. If one constantly entrusts to and reveres the Buddhas, that in itself is to perform great offerings. When one performs great offerings, one entrusts to the inconceivable working of the Buddhas. If one constantly entrusts to and reveres the precious Dharma, one never tires of listening to the Buddha's teaching. If one never tires of listening to the Buddha's teaching, one entrusts to the inconceivable working of the Dharma. If one constantly entrusts to and reveres the undefiled Sangha, one attains the point where Shinjin never retrogresses. If one attains the point where Shinjin never retrogresses, one's power of Shinjin is immovable. If one's power of Shinjin is immovable, one's faculties are purified and become clear and sharp. If one's faculties are purified and become clear and sharp, one is able to approach true teachers. If one becomes able to approach true teachers, one devotes oneself to practicing the vast, supreme good. If one practices the vast, supreme good, one acquires the immense causal power that leads to Buddhahood. If one acquires the immense causal power, one attains the peerless, decisive understanding. If one attains the peerless, decisive understanding, one is protected by all the Buddhas. If one is protected by all the Buddhas, one is able to awaken the mind aspiring for enlightenment. If one awakens the mind that aspires for enlightenment, one diligently practices the virtues of the Buddhas. If one diligently practices the virtues of the Buddhas, one is born into the home of the Tathagatas. If one is born into the home of the Tathagatas, one performs good and practices skillful means. If one performs good and practices skillful means, one attains the pure mind of Shinjin. If one attains the pure mind of Shinjin, one realizes the unsurpassed supreme mind. If one realizes the unsurpassed supreme mind, one constantly practices the paramitas. If one constantly practices the paramitas, one fulfills all the practices of the Mahayana. If one fulfills all the Mahayana practices, one makes offerings to the Buddhas in accord with the Dharma. If one makes offerings to the Buddhas in accord with the Dharma, the mind of thinking on the Buddha is immovable. If the mind of thinking on the Buddhas becomes immovable, one constantly sees countless Buddhas. If one constantly sees countless Buddhas, one sees that the body of Tathagata is eternal. If one sees that the body of Tathagata is eternal, one realizes that the Dharma is everlasting and imperishable. If one realizes that the Dharma is everlasting and imperishable, one attains unhindered powers of speech. If one attains unhindered powers of speech, one can expound the boundless teachings. If one expounds the boundless teachings, one saves sentient beings by loving and caring for them. If one saves sentient beings by loving and caring for them, one attains the steadfast mind of great compassion. If one attains the steadfast mind of great compassion, one rejoices in the most profound Dharma. If one rejoices in the most profound Dharma, one is free from the faults of the created world. If one is free from the faults of the created world, one rids oneself of arrogance and self-indulgence. If one rids oneself of arrogance and self-indulgence, one benefits all sentient beings as well as oneself. If one benefits all sentient beings as well as oneself, one dwells in the realm of birth and death without fatigue or revulsion. The aspiration for birth is the command of the Tathagata calling to and summoning the multitudes of all beings. That is, true and real entrusting is the essence of aspiration for birth. Truly, aspiration for birth is not the directing of merit through the self-power of meditative and non-meditative practices, whether performed by ordinary people or sages of the Mahayana or the Hinayana. Therefore it is called, quote, not directing. However, sentient beings of the countless worlds, floundering in the sea of blind passions, and drifting and sinking in the ocean of birth and death, lack the true and real mind of directing virtues. They lack the pure mind of directing virtues. For this reason, when the Tathagata was performing bodhisattva practices out of pity for the ocean of all sentient beings in pain and affliction, in every single moment, every single instant of his endeavor in the three modes of action, he took the mind of directing virtues as foremost, and thus realized the mind of great compassion. Accordingly, the Buddha directs this other benefiting, true and real mind of aspiration for birth to the ocean of all beings. Aspiration for birth is this mind of directing virtues. It is none other than the mind of great compassion. Therefore, it is untainted by the hindrance of doubt. Let us turn to the passage teaching the primal vows fulfillment with respect to the mind of aspiration for birth. The larger sutra states, quote, which is directed to them from Amida's sincere mind, and aspiring to be born in that land, they then attain birth and dwell in the stage of non-retrogression. Further, the Sutra of the Tathagata of Immeasurable Life states, quote, when sentient beings, cherishing Amida's directing of his roots of good to them, aspire to be born in the land of immeasurable life, then all shall be born in accord with their aspiration, attaining the stage of non-retrogression and ultimately the supreme, perfect enlightenment. The treatise on the Pure Land states, quote, how is directing of virtue accomplished? It is by never abandoning any sentient being in suffering, but constantly aspiring in the heart to fulfill the mind of great compassion, taking the directing of virtue as foremost. The master of Quanming Temple, Shanjiao, says, quote, let the person who seeks to be born with the mind of aspiration and directing of virtue aspire for attainment of birth by unfailingly and decidedly taking as essential the vow directed to him from the true and real mind. This mind, in its profound entrusting, is like diamond. It is not shaken, confused, defeated, or broken by people of other views, other teachings, different understandings, or different practices. Just be decisively settled, single-heartedly, hold to the vow, and rightly and directly go forward. The commentary on the Contemplation Sutra states, quote, people of the present, both monk and lay, seek to awaken the supreme mind. But it is extremely difficult to abhor birth and death, and difficult to aspire to the Buddha Dharma. Let us all together awaken the diamond-like aspiration and, transcending crosswise, cut off the four currents. Upon truly receiving the diamond-like mind, according with the vow in that one thought moment, we become persons who consequently attain nirvana.